Okay, we're going.
All right. Hi, my name is Natalie Stanley, and I'm part of Group 11 from JOMC 487. And our project is, should social media allow politicians to lie in their paid advertisements? And is it the same for private individuals?
My name is Nessa Cox. I will just kind of start going over that ethical conflict. So most of our data and examples we pulled was from Facebook because they had been in the news for a little bit about what they're allowing and how Mark Zuckerberg specifically, doesn't really believe that Facebook should implement anything on fact checking. Going into this project, I will say I was a little thrown off by that because why wouldn't Facebook want to implement this fact checking? Why wouldn't they want people to be informed? Mark Zuckerberg basically made the point that people should be able to say what they want, and people should be able to see that politicians are like what they're saying and what they're lying about. It's up to the consumers to fact check it for themselves. We will just kind of go into this here. So for an ad to be used on Facebook, it does need to adhere to Facebook's policies. And some things that Facebook prohibits in ads are misleading claims, misinformation, and controversial content. But also, it doesn't really, as long as the advertiser complies with the laws, then Facebook doesn't really get too into it. So those white lies, those minor things, Facebook isn't going to restrict necessarily.
Okay, well, so for the pros and cons for this, we have here that many people believe that when they see a political ad on Facebook, it must be true because all ads on Facebook have to follow Facebook's guidelines, which includes prohibiting misleading claims, misinformation, and controversial content. Facebook has publicly said that actually they do not and will not fact check a political ad because they believe it infringes on the candidate's right to free speech, and that the voters should research for themselves if a claim made in the ad is truthful or not. The pros of this are that candidates are able to be more candid about the claims they make because the ad likely won't be censored, and Facebook earns a large amount of money from these ads. The cons are that people assume that ads are factual when they are not, and this allows misinformation to be spread. This could cause a vote for a candidate based on lies, and Facebook will allow false claims in political ads, which does not follow Facebook's policies when other ads have to. Facebook does not have to accept all political ads, so they essentially get to pick which ads are shown to you, and it seems like a conflict of interest for Facebook to earn so much money from selling political ad spots.
So the solution to this isn't easy because kind of like it says in that first sentence there, unlike broadcasting, social media doesn't have a guideline from the government. Broadcasting has the Federal Trade Commission, and that regulates along with the Layhem Act. So ultimately, the solution to this is Facebook and other social media sites doing that fact checking and monitoring. But if Facebook doesn't plan on doing this ever in the future, then the solution to this is just making sure that voters and consumers of these social media sites are informed. You definitely kind of have to bring into account the money that Facebook brings in, and that's like a whole other ethical issue if Facebook should be taking money for lies that politicians may or may not be distributing. But yeah, we will just go on to some data charts here on our next page.
All right, so for these next three pie charts, they're all about what voters think of political ads on social media. So the first chart here we have, on the left, we have the percent of all registered voters who said they oppose social media platforms choosing to remove political advertisements, which includes lies or fabrications. And then on the right here, we have the percentage of all registered voters who said they oppose social media platforms choosing not to remove these advertisements, which may include lies or fabrications. So to break it down, which there's, on the right, we have a much larger amount, and these are the number of people who say they don't want these ads to be on Facebook. They don't want them to be allowed on Facebook, and they think that there should be people employed by the social media site who are in charge of fact-checking these advertisements. And then on the next one, it's broken down between political parties. And so and all of these numbers are pretty close, but on the left here, we have the percent of Republicans that said they do not oppose leaving ads on social media platforms. And on the right, we have the percent of Republicans that said they oppose leaving these political ads on social media platforms. So again, we have a larger number of people who do not approve of these political unchecked ads being on social media. And then finally, we have the Democrats, and the numbers here are a little different as in terms of political party. The Republicans, it was 44 to 56%, and on the bottom here with Democrats, we have 35 to 65%. So on the right, we have the percentage of Democrats who said they oppose leaving these ads on social media platforms, which this does not surprise me too much. I'm a political science minor, and I'm sure many of us are pretty aware of politics or whatnot. And just if you're going to generalize, a lot of the time, Democrats are more into government intervention when it comes to things, to making sure that we have a society that runs smoothly. And so it kind of doesn't surprise me that more Democrats than Republicans would say they support this moderation of these political ads, rather than just, being able to post these ads at will without being responsible for making sure that they're correct.
Good deal. So then we will move on to our supplemental video and audio here. So this first audio clip I'm going to play for you is Mark Zuckerberg going into it, into the issue and his opinion on the subject. We talked a little bit about it on the first page, but this will just kind of give you some pull quotes from it and kind of delve more into his thought process and reasoning behind it.
Perhaps the most recent and known debate about this topic is Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. Recently, Zuckerberg testified in front of Congress about his app and political ads. He defended Facebook and their rules regarding political ads and lies. Here's a small bit of his reasoning.
I believe that it is important for people to be able to hear and see what politicians are saying. I think that when they do that, that speech will be heavily scrutinized by other journalists, by other people.
Zuckerberg also defended his belief that Facebook should be centered on free expression, unlike other companies and countries that have social media censorship.
I don't think it's right for a private company to censor politicians or the news in a democracy.
In conclusion, Zuckerberg is a big advocate for allowing political ads on his platform, Facebook. He believes that it is more hurtful and dangerous for our democracy when private companies start censoring what the population sees and hears.
I do think it is a good point that Zuckerberg brings up, and our audio does, about social media being a private company. I think a lot of times it kind of gets lost because these sites are free to join. Most people are on them. It's very rare to meet someone that's not on social media anymore. So I think a lot of times we don't really think of these as private companies. We think of them as kind of those public entities per se. But yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was actually a good point that he made. Just the thought of a private company, one such as Facebook, that is used by, I don't know, dare say, a majority of Americans are on this website. And if you consider, the amount of money that goes into like political campaigns, and private companies, are so very involved into that. And so if you think about Facebook, and then when they get to, monitoring political content, that could be very problematic. if they didn't allow everyone to post, say they favored one party over the other, and they only ran the ads from the political party that they chose to support. So I could see that being very problematic towards, isolating like a certain party and a certain belief on such a widely used platform.
I think it'll be interesting to see if in the future, as social media becomes more of the norm than it already is, if we end up seeing those like a kind of body like the Federal Trade Commission and the Layhem Act go into place to help monitor these things, as broadcasting kind of becomes that smaller percentage of where people get their news.
Mm-hmm.
But for next, we will go into our first interview. And these are opposing views that we're going to be showing you here. Our first one's Brennan, and he will kind of introduce himself a little bit in the video. So I will just go ahead and play that here.
Hi, Brennan. Thank you for making the time to speak with me today. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you're majoring in?
Sure. Yes, my name is Brennan Sleekle. I am a current junior at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I am a marketing major with minors in fashion as well as Asian studies. I am super passionate about the art of communicating to consumer groups, and I've had experiences with interning at Nelnet as a spring pathway intern. I've been the marketing coordinator at Duffy's Tavern since January. And I'm involved with UBC Nebraska, where I'm marketing chair. I'm vice president of College Business and Ethics Board. I'm on the union board, and I also am a staffer with Launch Leadership. So I have a lot of passion, a lot of extracurricular experience, and I love to channel that into my everyday life.
Being a marketing major and having all those marketing positions, you obviously probably learn a lot and are involved a lot with social media and a lot of different social media platforms. Do you say you're pretty familiar with most social media platforms from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Yes, I definitely think I have a pretty advanced knowledge on like the main social media platforms, as well as some other ones that aren't as familiarized.
So as you know, a lot of candidates for different positions will often advertise on these social media platforms. I guess the main question is whether or not politicians should be allowed to lie within their paid advertisements. Do you have a stance on that?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Unless it's libel, which is labeled unconstitutional, then I think that line is okay. Like, I guess the scope of like how big the lie is important. I think if it like purposefully like dismantles the other candidate's like reputation, I think that that's not okay. But I think if you're lying in general, I think it's fine. I mean, it's freedom of speech, and if you need to embellish your campaign, then you have to do it with like a white lie, then I don't see any issue with that.
Do you think the same standard lies with private individuals?
Like the same standard of being able to lie, like if somebody's running for like a position in general?
Yeah.
I mean, like, do I think it's morally correct? No, but do I think it's like unconstitutional and deserve like criminal consequences? No. So like, I think it's not completely morally rational, but I think that as an independent citizen, I think you're allowed to, like I said earlier, have freedom of speech. So, you know.
Do you think that there would be any ramifications of allowing it, or any bad consequences or good consequences that would come from being allowed to lie in a political ad?
Yes, I think that the ramifications will mostly be, you know, if a lie is told and it's like changes, if that lie is the catalyst of like changing somebody's perspective on a candidate and getting to vote for them, I think that the ramifications would be that people are being fed misinformation and voting for things and policies and people that aren't like abiding by what those people who are the voters, what they want. I think the ramifications would be more socio-political in that. So I think that people would be like voting for people they don't actually think would be fit in like official positions.
So Facebook made a decision to not fact check ads and allow ads to be posted without being fact checked. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think like any social media, I think that the Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, what they want is they want online traffic. They want online traffic so that their advertising spaces can be more beneficial to ad agencies and marketers. So I think if by enabling any type of political ad, they're definitely going to create noise. And I think that some of the most controversial and some of the most like conspicuous like advertisements for political campaigns probably have a lot of their content rooted in fallacy. So I think that if you need to create a boom like of growth for an increased volume in users, I think that from Facebook's perspective, they're just in that because they're remaining unbiased by letting things be not fact checked as well. Back to my original point, I think that from a marketing perspective, like it makes sense because a lot of like you can if an advertisement isn't fact checked, you can put anything out there, causing a lot of traffic on the website, and that is the real intent of all social media.
Would you consider it infringing on free speech if an ad was not allowed that had blatantly incorrect information on it?
Yes. Circling back to my original point, I think that to an extent, I think if it's libel, then yes. But I think if it is a lie that isn't as fraudulent and isn't as personal to a person attacking another person and creating a smear campaign, I think that as long as it's constitutional, I think it's okay.
Would you consider it the responsibility then of the viewer to fact check the information that they see?
Yeah, absolutely. As like an independent and critical thinker, like you're supposed to question government and you're supposed to question everything around you, and you're supposed to critically think about things. Fact checking should be that should be everybody's agenda. I think an issue in society today is that people get so comfortable in pigeonholed perspectives of looking and getting all their information from one news source or getting all their information from a bunch of different news sources that are umbrellaed under the same political ideology. The way I fact check is I constantly am looking at Fox News and CNN and looking at both sides of arguments. Also looking at those more unbiased journalistic viewpoints. I mean, the reason that such right and left wing journalistic like news centers are popular is because they produce information that fuels hatred and fuels disparity between people. I think that it's America's and society's responsibility to rewire the way we look at things and like pay more attention to those more unbiased platforms like BBC or the New York Times. So
I will go ahead and pause it there. And if you want to finish it, we will link it somewhere on the discussion board where you can look at the rest of it. So Brennan brings up some really good points in that, and I think he really looks at it from the viewpoint of a journalism student and someone who's studying that marketing and advertising perspective. That isn't something that I went into this project thinking. I thought lying is bad. I think Facebook should fact check. And so I think it is very commendable that he kind of brought up that libel and like free speech stuff all on his own, per se. His teachers and professors did a good job instilling that in him.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting how he was kind of talking about like degrees of lying.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that can get really tricky. And I haven't read Facebook's policy myself, but he's like, okay, so you can't do libel, but then like small white lies are okay. But I mean, I feel like, is there a middle ground? Like at what point does it become libel? And then I think that's kind of where it can be really tricky. And I think it might be tough to, if Facebook were to start, including laws or, checking every single political campaign or political ad on Facebook, it might be, tough, tricky for them to really interpret. So.
Well, and who's to say that Zuckerberg and his team at some point did look into it and just decided there's way too many degrees. We're just not gonna even delve into this. We're just gonna let the people do what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
So this next interview is kind of on a different side. I will go ahead and play it, and then we can talk a little bit more about it.
They should not be allowed to, because it's providing false information to sway people one way or another. So they should be truthful and provide facts and not lies. I think it should be the same for anybody. You should always put out the truth and not lies. It makes people believe things that are not true, and then they spread that false information, and then it just becomes a snowball effect of people believing things that are not true, because they will make up a lie to portray the other candidate in a negative light so that it's more positive on them, so it affects how people think about the other person. And I think everything should be fact-checked regardless of what side it's on. Should be the platform. It shouldn't be allowed to put out false information. I think more people trust an ad because they think that that's already been done for them.
Okay, so I will go ahead and minimize that. So she definitely had a different viewpoint than Brennan, kind of going into that with the it should fall on the platform. But I think that goes back to kind of seeing the platform as that public entity and not as a private company.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it's a little bit idealistic, it'd be nice to think that we're all good people and we just should not lie because mom and dad told us not to lie. But, if politics can be tricky, and, I think that she had, or, I don't disagree with her viewpoints, but it's just, a lot of that stuff is just so much more complicated. And that's why we are discussing this issue today.
Yeah, I think one of the turning points for me was looking at it from a point of free speech. I think those politicians kind of fall under that, even though it is an advertisement. But I think her point or opinion might change if Facebook were to go around and start fact checking individual users and just kind of making that stance as well.
Right. Oftentimes, I think companies will think, you could have these rules and regulations and go and try to make sure rules or users are following them as closely as possible. But in reality, that is so much more time consuming and restrictive, and it just opens you up to like a lot of potentially giant lawsuits or legal ramifications, for violating freedom of speech. And it's been determined in like recent court cases, in the 21st century that, Facebook is a platform, a public platform where you need to be able to say what you want. So it's been like established by the Supreme Court that we have certain inalienable rights to speech on the internet as well. And so that's something very interesting to me that has changed, within the last 20 years.
I think it'll definitely be interesting to see how these issues change within the next few years as social media develops and becomes even more widespread than it already is.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
Well, now would usually be the time where we start taking questions, but we will just try and answer those in the discussion board. I think that is all.
All right.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Thank you.